Welcome to this special podcast interview to preview the upcoming Broken Hill City Council elections on September the 14th. Today I have with me the three mayoral candidates, the current Mayor Tom Kennedy, who is running again as an independent, Darriea Turley, the Labor candidate, and also Dave Gallagher as an independent. Emily McInerney, the former Barrier Daily Truth journalist, interviewed you all separately to write an in-depth election preview in issue 2 of A Home in the Outback News Magazine, which is available to buy for $5 at Foodland, the Broken Hill Bookshop, the Barrier Stationer, Big Sky Stories, Under the Silver Tree and Pepe's Milk Bar. The purpose of today's discussion is to introduce you to the mayoral candidates, particularly if you are new to town, and to complement Emily's journalism in the news magazine. We'll endeavour to keep our conversation to 45 minutes. So in order to do that, I will limit our conversation to 3 topics: the Murray-Darling Pipeline, childcare and council projects. And then if we have time, I'll give you an opportunity to each introduce your team. I do ask that you try and keep your answers as succinct as possible. But to begin with, in 2 minutes, can you tell me who you are and your Broken Hill story? And I'm going to start with you, Dave.
Yeah, well, first name is Dave Gallagher. My Broken Hill story is I have been in the New South Wales Police Force for over 40 years and came to a town after leaving Sydney to a town called Broken Hill. I thought I hadn't been here before, heard a lot about it. And I first drove into town and said, oh my God, what have I done? And then started meeting people. Being the first time here, it's a bit of a daunting to come into a town like Broken Hill, the biggest mining town I've ever seen in my life, and had a lot of people here at that time. Came into town with the police and actually fell in love with the place, the people, the town, everything about it. As I thought to myself, I was only going to spend 2 years here, but I've spent over 33 years here. It's the best place in the world, and a good person said there's 2 people in the world, one people born in Broken Hill and one always wanted to be in Broken Hill. So that's the best thing about Broken Hill, the people, the town, the atmosphere. Everyone's here to help. If you give the town a go, the town will open up to you, and that's what I love about Broken Hill. It's just an iconic place, the birthplace of the mining industry, the birthplace of the safety of the mines. And it's just a fantastic place to live, affordable, and everyone sort of knows everyone, and everyone helps everyone. That's the best part of the town, and I'll never leave here. There's one place I'll ever go is Rackhouse Street, and that's the last place I'll be seeing. So I'm totally committed to the town because the town's helped me out, and I'll only be here to help the town out as much as I can, as long as there's breath in my lungs.
Thanks, Dave. And we'll go to you now, Tom. What's your 2-minute Broken Hill story?
Born in Broken Hill, lived in Broken Hill most of my life, except for 8 years. I lived in Adelaide to go to university, came back to Broken Hill to open up a business. My mother's family moved to Broken Hill, or her relatives moved to Broken Hill in 1885, so just after the city had been discovered. In 1912, my father's family moved to Broken Hill, so I have a very long tradition in Broken Hill. Love Broken Hill. I believe it's the friendliest city in Australia. I'm proud to say that at every opportunity, just how great Broken Hill is. For me, I just want to do what I can for Broken Hill to make sure that Broken Hill remains the best place to live. I want to ensure that Broken Hill does grow. I'll be very happy if Broken Hill gets to above 20,000 people, and I could, as Dave said, you could happily die knowing that Broken Hill will last forever, and that's why it's so important to me to make sure that Broken Hill is a great place to live. So if my family or my children or their ancestors want to live in Broken Hill, there will be a Broken Hill for them to live in.
And Darriea, we'll go to you now. What's your 2-minute Broken Hill story?
Well, I don't think anybody can give their story in 2 minutes, but I'm going to try. I'm a local girl, went to study in Sydney and went to Ag College to study in Sydney and absolutely did not cope very well in what I call the big city. Still struggle with escalators. And I came back and did nursing and worked in health for 43 years. My family I had here, I married a local, Our family were actually, my dad was a unionist, very proud unionist, really invested in the safety of the mine workers. And in those days, mining was the biggest industry. My grandparents owned property up at Tibooburra and down at Pooncarie. So we have a really interesting story. But on my mum's side, I am the granddaughter of an original Cameleer. So it is kind of that mix of why you love the land, why you love the outback. And every time I fly into Broken Hill, I overlook the city like I'm a new visitor. And I just want to see it again to make sure I'm back home. And for all that, there is so much to be done for Broken Hill, but it's about the community. There is nothing more prouder than you walk down the street and everybody says hello to you. Everybody wants to tell you their story, which is great, but it is about community. And for me, family, community, work together for a better community.
Thank you, Darriea. Now, when it comes to elections, it's really about a contest of ideas. So what you believe is important and worthy of our attention and effort. And so I thought I would ask you each to name 3 words that sum up your values. We'll start with you, Dave.
Yeah, loyalty, progressive thoughts, and the love of the city. They're my 3.
Tom?
Yeah, that's a funny one. It's a bit like a job interview.
Well, it is, isn't it?
I suppose one thing that am is honest. Love honesty. I think is very important. Transparency and leadership.
Darriea, and for you?
I guess, there's kind of the values that you have and live your work values by, but there is one thing that I always check in with, and it's called unto myself be true. Bit sort of a twist on the Shakespearean part. So you can say all those things about honesty and that, but you've got to check in to make sure that it's reflective of who you are when you're making decisions for the community, when you're making decisions about planning. So a big test of time, unto myself be true, sits there undermining my other values.
Now, can you each give me your 2-minute election pitch? Why should people vote for you as the next mayor of Broken Hill City Council? And we'll go backwards now. We'll start with you, Darriea.
Thank you for that. Can I say that we're asking the community to vote for our Labor team? We've outlined the projects that we want to deliver. We actually set an infrastructure agenda in the last council when I was former mayor, and that agenda is coming to fruition. And for all this, we want to make sure now we've seen the gaps. The gaps are clearly around childcare providers, those early childhood educators. The gaps are clearly about our infrastructure for our younger community as well. And then how do we invest in our workers? We really have to invest in our workers for council so they can do the jobs for making sure that our community is that vibrant community again. Now, with that, why would they vote for me? They know my record. They know I have access both to state and federal ministers. And they also know I have a team that has fresh ideas about the future of our community.
Thanks, Darriea. And we'll go to you now, Tom.
Yes, so first elected in 1999 at only 29 years of age. So I have learnt a lot over that period of time. I'm very proud to say that this council did achieve the first surplus budget in over 25 years, so economic management is really important. Also very committed to reinstitutionalising a local workforce within the council. Most people in this city probably remember the restructure that absolutely decimated council's workforce and has resulted in poor road maintenance and poor footpath maintenance. So I'm really committed to regrowing that workforce so that our roads are kept up to a standard that everyone expects and our footpaths are of a standard that everyone expects. Childcare is another very important one. So I have been in talks constantly with the state and federal government to free up land to expand childcare services in the city. I'm proud to say that there is a childcare service out the south that will increase its numbers, and council is helping to provide the building for that to happen. So the The other really important thing, of course, is the airport. The airport is one of the most important things, and that's to link Broken Hill, make sure we have accessibility so people that do move to Broken Hill to be employed, they can get home to where their family are at a cheap cost. Otherwise, we lose those people.
And lastly, you, Dave?
Yeah, look, I was first elected to council in 2011 on a by-election. I had previously ran for council a couple of times, was unsuccessful. Look, I have the passion, I have the drive, I have the enthusiasm to lead the city into greatness. We're heading that way. We've worked hard this last term. We have delivered the surplus budget, I must agree there. We are striving to increase our beautification of the city. That'll continue. To use local workforce is another one of mine. I'll ensure that we do get traineeships, apprenticeships, work with the general manager, work with the council. I know the line between operational and the council. I know that line, and I will not cross that line at all. I do also have contacts in state and federal parliament. I was a member of a political party, but I chose to leave there for personal reasons, and I have those contacts as well. I've also got contacts in other areas called the Regional Development Australia, Far West, and I'm heavily involved in childcare, trying to get that into the city. I have been part of a grant which Michael Williams has written, asked by the state government for the RDA Far West to do that grant, and I'm sure that will come into fruition. That could be up to $5 million bought into 3 parts of Western New South Wales. So I've got the contacts, I've got the drive, I've got the inclination. I have a team also of Broken Hill people which are going to move forward, if elected, and drive the city into being the best place and the most livable place in the world.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So the first issue I wanted to talk about was the Murray-Darling pipeline, which you all acknowledge in the story that was published is an issue for the community. Darriea, you were mayor when the government announced in 2016 it would build this 270-kilometre pipeline to pipe water from the Murray River at Wentworth to Broken Hill. Now, up until this time, the community was getting its water piped from the Darling River and Menindee Lakes area, but due to the lack of water, the government decided to build this pipeline. I moved here in 2020 and bought a house, and I had no idea about the issues surrounding the cost of having water from the Murray River. So can you just explain who determines the cost of water and how is the cost of water calculated?
Who determines the cost of water is the independent body called IPART, and they determine the cost of water. And they come out and consult with our communities, and we have to be united no matter who is elected. We have to be united to remind the government this pipeline was imposed on us. It is not going to give us water security because of all the issues that could happen in the Murray, but the price of delivery of the water to the tap can in fact cause great problems for our community to pay. And for all this, part of it is every one of us should be fighting for when the IPART starts their consultation and when Essential Water starts their consultation, we should be fighting to make sure and remind the government, we didn't ask for this. The reality is that the Darling River had stopped flowing for over 500 days. And with that, we kept saying the Darling has stopped flowing because of what is happening up north of the Darling and in the catchment area. So there's several complicated issues. The price of water is gold. That's what we discovered during that great drought. And the imposing of putting a pipeline on us without even us seeing the environmental impact statement or really without that community consultation still shocks me to this day. And I still see the faces and the mayors that stood with us to try and bring back a reality of what was happening for the state of the Darling and the impact a pipeline will bring.
So, and I'm sorry if I just missed your answer, but is it the cost of water is including the cost of that pipeline?
They will judge the delivery. The independent body will do an assessment on the flow of the pipeline, the water up the pipeline. How much is it going to cost to deliver water to Broken Hill? They will do an assessment on that. We will come in and argue that our community cannot pay for and it was imposed. And I think it's Section 3 of the Terms of Reference of IPART does refer to the social impacts of the community, but it really is every time that IPART decides to assess our water pricing, we have to make sure we fight hard, regardless of who is elected mayor, to hear our community's concerns.
So I might just ask you, Tom, at this point, what is the current cost of water? Do you know?
So it works out about $1,400 per annum per household on average. That includes your sewage and water charges as well as usage. That enables the essential water to get cover the costs of operations. What's a concern is that it currently is $40 million per annum and for maintenance, operation and depreciation of the pipeline from the Murray River to Broken Hill. If those costs were passed on to the Broken Hill community, it works out $4,000 per household, regardless of your water usage. There's very little additional costs in that. It is operation, maintenance and depreciation that will be there probably regardless of the amount of water that goes through it. So it's impossible for people to reduce their charges. What is even more concerning is the pipeline actually then meant that there was no legislation that actually requires water to be in the Menindee Lakes. The only legislation that required water to be in the Menindee Lakes was Broken Hill secured supply within that lakes. That has now been removed, which means that they can legally now drain the Menindee Lakes, and there's also no criteria that means that they need to keep water going down the Darling River to put water in the Menindee Lakes. I did speak to the Minister for Water, Rose Jackson, about this and did say to her the importance of getting more than a 3-year exemption. At the moment, both the Coalition and the Labor government have only given us a 3-year exemption and extended it on each occasion. We've got no long-term commitment by either government. So Minister Rose Jackson did argue a bit about what that would mean. She did give a commitment she would look into it, but the reality is we've only got a commitment from both governments for 3 years.
So just to go back to that figure of 1,400 that you mentioned, how long is that in place for? So is it for 3 years? And the second part of that question is, so where is that $1,400 come from me as a householder? Is it kind of come from within my rates, or is it part of the water costs? I'm just trying to understand.
So you pay about $250 fixed costs per quarter. That includes your sewage charges and access to the pipeline, and then you charge about $2.70 per kilolitre, or around that amount of water per kilolitre you use. So big users might be paying say $600-700 a quarter. Small users only use say 20 or 30 kilolitres for the year, so they're only paying an extra $90 on top of the set $1,000 in fixed costs.
So, and it comes through on your rates notice. That's what I'm trying to recall in my head.
No, it comes in from your water bill, so it's a separate thing to the rates. It's got councils. Broken Hill Council is different to a lot of councils. We don't control the water. Water's controlled by Essential Water, which is a Sydney area. It's the only one in the country other than Sydney Water that is managed by Sydney Water or Essential Water.
The other issue about how long is that current price?
So that's each year it's going up by CPI at the moment, plus 1%. So we've got a really good, IPART did listen to what was said. Essential Water was asking for much larger increases. IPART did listen to the council submission, and they listened really strongly to that submission, and that was to do with particularly during summer there was water restrictions. So the argument put forward by Essential Water at the time was that people have used less water than they suspected they'd use. They had less income, so they should up the price of water to cover that cost. Our argument was people use less water because they want water restrictions, and it shouldn't be taken into account, and IPART saw that to be right and didn't have the increases they would have.
So when does IPART do its consultation or review again?
So every 3 years. So it'd be coming up in probably about another 18 months or so.
Okay.
Could be sooner, because I wouldn't be surprised if Essential Water doesn't start consulting soon. What I'm hearing around town is that, this could be soon. So it's important as a council and for our community to be really aware of this.
So what's the solution? Is it kind of lobbying state politicians? I'm just trying to understand what the answer.
It's totally about the state government. They need to give us a guarantee that we only pay water at the end of the pipeline, so before it comes into our treatment plant. We also still look after Stevens Creek and Umbarumika as a cost to the community. Stevens Creek is at the moment being used to gravity feed down the pipeline to supply 8 properties just outside Menindee Lakes, because it was a commitment by the government at the time to continue to provide water to them. At the moment, we are covering the costs as a community. So IPART is aware of a lot of the issues that face us, particularly as a town, but the pipeline and the cost of the pipeline before it gets to Broken Hill is a different issue that needs to be addressed by the state government. They need to give us a commitment that they will fund it long time. It will never be passed on to the Broken Hill community as a cost.
Yeah, and the challenge is that Essential Water has 2 shareholders, I think, the Treasurer and I think the Minister for Environment. And so we're arguing with IPART, an independent body. We want the state government to give us maybe some assurity or legislation to say that Broken Hill had this imposed on them because of mismanagement of water. And, you know, for all that, if you look at the players, the state government pops up in 2 areas. One as the shareholder for Essential Water and the other one is around the Minister Rose Jackson and getting legislation and surety from her.
Exactly right. My opinion is that the pipeline came in to produce fresh water, secure water for Broken Hill, and it's a lot securer now than it was in the previous time. But we're exactly right in relation to IPART. They're the ones who control the pricing. But the situation is, at the present stage, if I'm mayor or if I'm not mayor, I'll still be making sure I lobby the state government to make that decision now. They can make that decision about the pricing and so forth with IPART. Just gives that guarantee that they won't inflict those prices. They can happen now. It can go through Parliament and get done now.
I mean, what I'm hearing from all of you is you're in a complete agreement about this issue in particular and the advocacy of the community and their awareness about it. We're going to move on to the second issue, which is childcare. And look, the lack of childcare is an issue for many people in town, but we also need to talk about how we actually maintain the current childcare services we have. And both issues are not mutually exclusive. And what I want to do is actually try and map out in conversation the big picture of what's going on, and then I'll give you each an opportunity to talk about how you see the solution to the issue. So I want to ask just some basic information type questions to help explain to people the dynamics of the situation. We have the family daycare in town, which is currently run by the Cobar Shire Council, and they are looking for someone to take over the service. And last year, under your leadership, Tom, the council voted not to take over the management of that service. But just first explain, just for the purpose of information, Tom, how many... do you know how many family daycares are in town and how many children or families they support through its service? Just to give an idea of kind of the number of people that would be impacted by, say, the closure of, or not the closure, but the number of people who find that service really important.
Look, many families do. At the time, so I can only go on the time, there was 13 family daycare educators. They provided up to around 70 to 80 families. They had many people on their lists as well. Council has our Broken Hill area is what's called a childcare desert. That's considered a childcare desert when you only have one spot for 3 children that are looking. In Broken Hill, we have one spot for 7 children looking. So it is a very big issue. With the family daycare, Broken Hill Council did find 2 providers that were willing to take on the service in Broken Hill. That was a local provider as well as a provider that would be operating from Sydney. So Council did look into making sure that service did continue. There was no way that Council was going to let that service not continue. At the time, the Cobar Shire increased charges after council said they wouldn't do that, increased the charges by 60% per family to keep the service viable. They told council that the service was viable. Council did look into it. Very quickly, it was seen that it would be running at a significant loss, and the Cobar Shire increased prices by 60% to parents using that facility.
So Cobar Shire Council still operates that, and it's not. What happened to those two people who were interested, or two providers who were interested in running that?
So I do believe they still would be interested. Cobar Shire reneged and pulled out.
And so the other thing I wanted to mention was also Silverlea Early Childcare Services, and it's had to close its service on some days because of staff shortages. And I know this because my children go to Silverlea. So the week of Monday, they had to close their service 2 days, the Tuesday and Wednesday. I was actually thinking of having a stall out at Monday, so I'm glad I didn't. And then last week they also had to close their service again on a Wednesday. As a small business owner, I don't feel I have secure childcare, which does impact how I think about growing my business moving forward if I can't rely on that. Now, if I switch to daycares, I'll probably go to the bottom of the list. And I do want to just acknowledge that Silverlea is a brilliant childcare under the leadership of Ange Trembath. And as a parent, I really applaud their communication and the way that both her and the board go above and beyond in communicating what's going on. And to me, it's really important that, as well as attracting childcare workers, that we retain childcare workers. I mean, because I imagine there'd be a lot of parents who'd be in the same situation as I am, with feeling nervous about the viability of Silverlea. And I don't mean to be an alarmist, but the genuine concern I have for their ongoing operations. Does anyone know of any other childcare services that are under similar staff shortages or concerns that you could just raise? I obviously know about Silverlea.
Well, so I did meet with Silverlea, the board, and also Ange Trembath. Their big issue there is also educators, particularly educators that are moving to other employment where they may be getting more money than what they are getting at Silverlea. So as a council, there was a mayoral minute moved and passed unanimously by council to write off to state and federal ministers explaining the urgency of making sure that educators are provided, and particularly additional funding. It was made also clear during that meeting that they did miss out on a round of funding that would have helped secure infrastructure, that would have helped secure potentially educators. So there is a shortage across the board in educators, and that's why they get taken from one area to another as you try to fill a need within the areas. But there's also a shortage of land to expand the services. So there's hundreds of people on waiting lists, but there's only so many spots available per educator. So very difficult to expand, particularly on a separate site.
Yeah. Is there any other childcares that you are aware of, Darriea, that are particularly vulnerable to, the issues of staff?
I think for all of them, the feedback I'm getting, the meetings I've had, early childhood educators and childcare providers really are the ones that are the forgotten people about accessing TAFE courses or training courses. So the message I was getting loud and clear is we don't have enough. The gaps and the reason why we don't is that the course provision is limited. Then for those that aren't provided or go through the course, having to do a student placement of 100 and something hours for Cert 3, and then having to do a student placement for 300 hours for your diploma, and depending on the size of students, you have to have a mix mash of diplomas and Cert 3s, then it's just not going to work. We've put a very clear path forward about what we want to do. We've found some, we've identified in the Western New South Wales Activation Initiative, there's funding there. We've spoken to Robertson College. We know that TAFE could be able to be set up with this funding initiative. But then we've said we've got to go and talk to the state and federal government. We've already started that and said, why don't we pay for student placement for early childcare providers, for these early childcare educators?
The grant is written that we've just spoke about earlier. That's what the money's all about. In this present stage, the TAFE Broken Hill are having those courses already. Byron Hooker's informed me that he's already started these courses. So that's already in place. In the placements, we can do them here. The biggest problem is the land, as Tom said. The land we need to build them on to get more kids in. We can have providers, we can get initiatives, we can get people trained up to work under other people with different certifications to ensure that this could happen. But we actually need the land. And the question that you asked, do you know anyone else that is? They're all looking for staff and people wanting to get back to work, wanting to put their kids in childcare, which they'd be happy to do. They want to get back into work to stimulate Broken Hill's growth, to stimulate the economy, to stimulate population growth. But we really need the land and we need the facilities for childcare to do that.
Okay, we'll move on next to council projects and finances, which does affect our council rates. Emily reported in the magazine that with you, Darriea, about the redevelopment of the O'Neill Sporting Precinct, which was started in your term, and also the library redevelopment. You say that if re-elected, you'll commit to having a splash park in Patton Park and an upgrade to the airport. I'm just wondering how much these items are going to cost ratepayers of Broken Hill.
It's a good question because the projects are already in play. Under the current council, they moved some of our funding to make sure those projects will go ahead. The splash park, these things will absolutely go down to the government's new initiative as well. How do we access those grant projects? So for all this, you look at the funding that's available. You look at, I'm in a unique position because I sit on quite a few state bodies, and so you look at the funding available. Those projects are going ahead. They'll be just about, 12 months down the track, they should be just about finished. But, for the funding, that the new generation of funding has to be identified in the new budget, and that has to be voted on by a new council.
Back to the splash park, you must have some idea of how much a project like this would cost.
I've seen splash parks in other areas. We're not talking over, a $15 million splash park, but I've seen projects come out about $3 million to $5 million, but even cheaper. So, for the design of it, to make sure that you get in and look at what the area is. And you've also got the finishing of stage 2 of the Patton Street redevelopment, because there was still work to be done around that. And for all that, again, when you're looking at any budget, it's about, let's put this in play. We have to do the work around that. But every concept, whether it was when we said we want to do the redevelopment of the O'Neill Sporting Complex, we wanted to include the netball courts and the other areas, it started from the idea. Then we do the work to get it in play. And then council has to endorse the budget for it.
Have a splash park as well, but we were going to have a splash park in the town square. But the viability and the cost-benefit analysis to have that, it's just... it's astronomical for what you have to pay for a splash park. Look, I totally agree. We need it. It'd be fantastic, but at the present stage, we've got to be fiscal management of our funds and our rates, and to ensure that we remain in a surplus budget. Stage 2 Patton Park, which would be unreal. The pump park for the kids to ride their bikes, and one of those pump tracks would be. I believe there'd be people, just amount of people going there as well as a splash park. We've just got to be fiscal management. We've got to really look forward, look after our funds, look forward to ensure that we do not increase our rates only for CPI and so forth, and to provide the same amount of services as we are at the present stage. So, splash parks are good, but we've really got to look at fiscal management of our funds.
Yeah, look, whatever project council chooses to do, they need to be operational cost effective. The reality is when we rejigged the Broken Hill Library, that was to reduce operational costs. You don't want to be paying $40 million for a library, which is terrible enough in the cost of the infrastructure, but it's the cost of operating. That goes the same for a water park. If you do a water park, whether it costs $3, $5, $10 million, isn't the issue. You can get that money from the state and federal governments to pay for it. What you do need is people to man those facilities. For example, the water slide at the swimming pool, the local swimming pool, is rarely open because you need 2 lifeguards to operate it at all time. The cost for that means hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional costs to the centre. So they can only have that open when they can afford it. So no matter what we do as a council, the netball redevelopment, for example, costs $3.8 million. What it does do, it reduces operational costs to council because they're not maintaining a substandard facility. So there's a savings to the community. So over a period of time, it reduces the costs. It means that you have less manpower going into areas that are well maintained, which means that we can then employ extra people in areas such as weed management and road maintenance. So anything, whether it might sound good to the community, but if it costs you additional staff time, that means it has to come from somewhere, and where it usually comes from is your road and footpath maintenance. So, and I implore any councillor that's listening to this or anyone in the community, whenever you do a project, the project must reduce operational costs. If it increases them, it is not good for the community. Everything needs to reduce operational costs so that it keeps rates down and it allows us to put operational matters into areas that people really need.
I just want to move to the O'Neill Sporting Precinct. Can you give me an update on where that's at? I did have a look on the website today and I just couldn't see A, a budget, or B, when it's actually starting. Tom?
I can let everyone know that so September you'll see some real action in the coming weeks, and then after the October long weekend you actually see concrete being laid. So you actually start to see the courts formed. There has been 12,000 tonne of material moved in there to level it. That has done 6 of the courts. There's another 4 to go. That shall be done by mid-September. They then go away for a little while, come back in just after the October long weekend, and you'll start to see the footings of all fences and the court. So very quickly, people will see the O'Neill courts themselves taking shape and very quickly opened.
How much is that project?
That project's $3.8 million. $3.8 million, probably $1.8 million more than what it would have been if it could have been done earlier, before the prices went up because of COVID. But a lot of what people don't realise, a lot of the work is not the actual courts themselves, it's the flood mitigation to make sure that the courts are not destroyed very quickly from water not running the right way. So at one end of the ground, because it's got a 1 in 100 drop, it is actually 800 to 900 millimetres higher than the other side.
And what about the lights or the other parts of that redevelopment? Where's that at?
So that'll happen very quickly as well. So all the electrical conducting has been done. They have it going under. They've moved it from going under the netball courts to going around, so that it's easy to maintenance. There's been additional water put around to make sure that it frees up for the tennis court. So very close to all being done at once.
I think it's going to be very exciting. I think if you've seen the state of the netball courts before, I think for all those that have played netball or want to play, I think it's going to be an exciting project, but also there's the rest of the redevelopment.
Now, I just want to go back. There's been mention of a multi-storey residential development to house essential workers. Now, that was to go to the iceworks, but in the end, the council wasn't able to buy that property. So where is council looking to build this project now, Mayor Kennedy?
Council will investigate a few areas that they keep confidential simply because the reason the ice works probably didn't go ahead was because Council was too keen and did let out information it probably shouldn't have let out, which resulted in the land no longer being available. So I won't say areas because it makes it then very difficult to negotiate about that, but I have spoken to a couple of developers as well that are very interested in being part of it. So I have no doubt at some stage there will be a multi-storey key worker housing development in Broken Hill, which I must say has been supported very strongly by Minister Rose Jackson, who has at a number of different committees and different organisations have spoken very highly about communities taking it upon themselves to have initiatives that do address shortages of housing.
I just want to go back to the library redevelopment as well. Now, I understand at the last election that, Tom, you had said you'd scrap the library, but in the end you kept to it and you had it redesigned because some of the spiralling costs. Do you recognise that you read the community wrong in promising to scrap the project?
No, not at all. Look, it's great we're getting a new library. I think libraries are one of the most important things you can have. We have it at the administration building at the moment, so I get to see library users just about every day of the working week. So very good little facility there, not enough room for the books that the council does have, but it is a pleasure for everyone to be there. A lot of people are very happy with that library. What was planned was a library that would have been a white elephant that council would probably never have been able to complete with the costs. But what made it very much worse was the operational costs would have blown out without a doubt. So we would have been looking at least $28 million instead of $15 million. That means an additional $13 million, which means the Argent Street development would not have happened. The O'Neill development would not have happened. The Duke of Cornwall development would not have happened. The additional footpaths would not have happened. So this is the thing, when you spend an extra $13 million, it has to come from somewhere, and where it comes from is other areas. It also means that you could not put on an extra 2 employees to do weed maintenance on the footpath because you have to use employees somewhere else. So there's always a cost when it comes to whatever. We did negotiate that we would be able to do it within the grant funding of state and federal, which amounted to about $12 million. Council's contribution to that was to be $3 million spent for the Argent Street development, which included paving, banner poles, town square, etc. That was council's contribution.
But you have put in about $3 million for the library redevelopment. Now I'll go to you, Darriea, just to respond, give you an opportunity to respond to Tom's comments in referring to the previous design as a white elephant.
Well, I would disagree, but I'm glad we're getting a library. And, that was a council decision. We're getting a library. I think for the design itself, it would have activated a space. It would have brought our children into that area. It connected the town hall facade with the library. The archives had their own home and study areas. We also had a children's play area. There was a whole lot of things, and a lot of it we've been able to retain and scale back. But I think for all of that, libraries are critical. Reading books is important. We had a youth section where young people could do filmmaking. There was so many things. And, I think sometimes just because we're not in a capital city doesn't mean we should miss out. But the reality is that the council made a decision. I support that. At least I wanted to make sure we got a library of some sort.
Did you want to say something, Dave?
Yeah, look, I'm totally agreeing with the library. Look, I was on council when the first one came up. I was very happy with the design to start off with, but due to spiralling costs and so forth, what was going on, I'm happy with what we've got now, the library. It is going to be a great library. It's going to have all the facilities. And it's not just a library. It's not reading books. It's a meeting place. People can go there all the time. And I go into council quite a bit and see a lot of people just enjoying books and enjoying people's company, playing chess and enjoying things like that where the community is. I'm very happy with the current library, where it is, how it's going, and I'm glad to see that it's actually broken ground and progressing very, very well at the present stage.
I also want to just ask what's happening with the archives, because and when will an archive be available? And then within that question is also the fact of what is council going to do about getting access to the archives of the Barrier Truth, so that information is there for the community to access, to research, and even someone like myself to be able to read previous news stories.
That question of the Barrier Daily Truth, you might as well ask the Barrier Daily Truth for that. The situation is we can get access to it, and I think the council would be gladly to have it in our archives, but the situation is it's with them at the present stage.
Yeah, but isn't there a responsibility from the council to actually advocate on behalf of the community that that information belongs to the community? So
council has contacted the Barrier Truth, or the Barrier Daily Truth, or the Industrial Council. So council has archives up until about 1980 of the Barrier Truth. So we've got all papers that have been digitalised up until that time. There's also a period, so there's a few periods that council does not have.
Just to clarify what you mean by that, do you mean from now back to 1980 or the other way?
The other way. Yeah. So there's a few areas that council did write to the Industrial Council saying, look, we're short in this area. Is there any chance that we can get those so that they do become part of the archive? Very important to make sure that you do have print, particularly newspapers of the time and court records of the time, because what they do is they actually show a history written at the time, as opposed, well, even though it is an interpreted history at the time, it's an important history. So council's I love heritage. I love history. For me, I think it's once you've lost it, you can't get it back. You can only get it back in a second hand or third hand. So for me, really important that particularly those missing parts to the council's own archives to do with the Barrier Daily Truth, that we do get those. For the archives themselves, they're very important. So that is stage 2 of the library. So there will be a stage 2, and council will be going after funding for to house the archives themselves.
Can I just add to that it's not just the newspapers, it's the minute books, or it's the records, the other records that's important from the Barrier Daily Truth. And that really worries me. I actually reached out straight away and rang the trades hall and said, what can we do? What can we do? Because I'm worried about the state of what disrepair they're in. But the minutes of the history of this great paper is so important to keep as well. So I think, that is another worry, in that we're all chipping away at that in our own way. And I know that Christine Adams is also very keen to make sure, as a historian, very keen to make sure that it's not just the papers that we tried to get the records of, but there is a whole heap of other documents that we want to try and salvage.
People paid for digital copies of their newspaper, and when it was gone, it was gone. So I think that information belongs to people. If they've paid for it, then they need access to that. So the 30, 35 plus years of information we're currently without. I think that it needs to be a high priority that we get this information. I will wrap it up there, but I'll give you each an opportunity just to talk about your own teams that are also running. We'll start with you, Dave.
Yeah, well, as we know, I'm the mayoral candidate and also running for councillor. I've Ron Page, a former mayor, former Central Darling councillor. We've got Dean Gross, been around a long time. His family's born and bred here. Very, very well respected in the sporting field down at a certain club down the northern area of Broken Hill. I've got Matt McCarthy, Detective Sergeant of Police, been here for many years. He's growing up in Ivanhoe, so is well versed with the Broken Hill area and the western part of New South Wales. And Anita Hoysted works at the health department, the Far West Health, and also a really keen soccer person heavily involved in soccer, and won an award for volunteering at the last awards. So I've got a very, very well-rounded team, and all have got Broken Hill at heart and put Broken Hill first.
Thanks, Dave. What about you, Tom?
Look, the same thing. I think anyone that goes on council puts Broken Hill at heart, and I can say that confidence no matter who's running. So I'm leading the ticket as the mayoral candidate, first elected in 99, probably just for about 5 or so years, wasn't a councillor during that period. At number 2, have Michael Boland, who was newly elected in 2021. Really likes council, help make sure that we still have a cinema in town, which was really important to the community. We have Jim Hickey at number 3, who's been Deputy Mayor and has been very heavily involved in mine-related council things and making sure we can get all we can for the community. Regularly speaks to ministers and shadow ministers. At number 4, we have Bob Allgate, long-time councillor, first elected in 2004, been Deputy Mayor before, very interested in finances, always make sure he understands and reads the finances, so very helpful. Number 5, Hayley Jewett, first elected in 2021, also very committed, also worked at the Darriea Daily Truth for many, many years, very passionate about making sure that the truth is looked after. At number 6, we have Alan Chandler, a businessman, also first elected in 2021, very passionate about making sure he can do all we can for the community. At number 7 is someone that's been really heavily involved in community organisations for a long time, pretty happy with having her voice, often has attended council meetings for 20 plus years. Elaine Gillett, very good volunteer. Number 8 is my son Thomas, who did want to help out. As he said, he's known no different, always been involved in council the entire time he's been alive. Been very helpful with our campaign, suddenly understands how stressful running can be, and that goes for all the people sitting here. People don't realise what happens at election times and how hard it can be. So he's only 20. Have James Elston, who is also only 20, very committed. Would love to get elected just because he now sees what can be achieved as a young person, how much better you can make an area by just putting your thoughts forward. You were just jokingly saying earlier that you'd want to be mayor, but as you speak, you do realise some of the things that you can be passionate about, and you think that, well, if I was involved, I could deliver some of those. So I can understand people saying it, and people should give it a go if they really are passionate. So I'm proud to say we actually have someone on our ticket that represents every decade from 20 to 80.
And yourself, Darriea?
Well, firstly, can I just acknowledge Councillor Marion Brown, who after many years has decided not to run again. And Marion was my first year English teacher, and I feel like I've tortured her for many years. So, but she's going to be a loss around the chamber. And for all that, her wisdom is certainly something that we've all valued, and her insight. So I lead the ticket. I've been on council since 1995. Currently, I'm the president of Local Government New South Wales, and I sit on the national board as well. And I've been sitting at parliamentary inquiries for the last 3 years, and it's really important that we have that voice of that area, and co-founder the Australian Mining Cities Alliance. And number 2 is Ashley Byrne. Ashley not only works in the mining industry, he's the asset supervisor at Pirellia, but he also is a community rep on our big project committee. So he's been sitting there in this term of council giving advice and working with council around our big projects. So he has great insight, and he ran in the last election. Then we have Blake Edgecombe. Blake has a psychology degree. He's studying law. He works at the health service, accrediting all our doctors that come to Broken Hill and all our specialists. He is really keen to be elected, and he ran in the last term as well. And then we have Nathan Fell, again working in the mining background. He's the one to watch. He's the one I think has that mayoral potential as well. And for him, he actually is so solid, such a hard worker. And he, again, ran at the last term. So these are three people that for all this time has had time to be mentored by Marion, time to meet monthly to talk about their plans, and then we're backed up by Richard Shoebridge, who is a clinical nurse consultant. He's in the arts. He has been in all these plays. He also is featured, I think, in RDA about why come to Broken Hill, because he loves it. He certainly is a solid person to be that anchor of, if you elect this fresh ticket, then you will get a new dynamics, a new delivery and a new vision for Broken Hill.
Thank you, Darriea, and I will want to thank you all for your time today and for your service to the community, and I wish you all well in the final days of your campaign. And I do hope in time that you'll get a pay rise in line with inflation as well. So thank you.
Thanks very much.